and doesn't have the money to pay more to begin with. So as you see the unemployment rate go down is when you'll see job pressure again. But right now the supply is just too big. That's why people aren't getting advances and pay raises, because there's too many people that want that job. So I mean, we really look at that. You know, that's out a couple of years before you see job growth, or before you see wage growth.
We see wage pressure in the realtor market as well. Yes, Sandy.
One of the things that you've been talking about is employment, wages, but let's talk about us, the entrepreneur who does not get a regular paycheck. And if we are going to have employment per se, but not wages per se, and we're looking to encourage entrepreneurs, borrowers, how many people in this room are stated income borrowers? And how do we treat those people in the lending market as opposed to how they have been treated for the past 2 years?
I think that's for you, Kyle.
Yeah, that's for me. You know, I've been in the real estate business for a long time, and as in the real estate business, you're frequently a stated income borrower because you have such great depreciation to offset your income. The good news is, from that side, that you might pay less taxes. The bad news is when you go to borrow something, it looks like you have less income. I think that pressure is going to continue to be strong. That's going to continue to be a challenge for people that are stated income borrowers and aren't able to show income. That trend is not going to reverse itself for some bit of time.
So we're not treating our entrepreneurs in a way that we need to treat them.
Well,
from the banking sector.
I don't know that I'd say that that's entirely true. That that's the next step, because there are a number of entrepreneurs that aren't necessarily in the stated income side. It becomes your income, how much expenses you're running through, that piece sort of gets there. But I think there are a lot of programs, you know, there's trial balloons for a lot of programs that are focused at doing that. Now, whether the execution gets there or not, you've seen the SBA loan programs significantly easing in the credit pieces that are going to happen for the SBA and additional funding for the SBA. The question is, how does it all get down to the entrepreneurial level? And the challenge that you have at a bank, and the big banks have just moved away from risk, right? It's easy. The big banks have just they used to credit score. So again, we're picking on Wells, but they're no different than all the rest. They don't have the underwriting capability to look at a small business and say, okay, well, we understand that you're a stated income borrower, but you're actually making money because of this, that, the other. They look at a credit score and they go, oh, you have an 800 FICO score and you're not stated income. We'll give you a $250,000 line of credit and it's done in a computer. They've pulled entirely out of that market, and so you know, a lot of entrepreneurs and stated income borrowers saw their lines of credit against their houses and other places pulled from them. You'll see some of the smaller banks step into that because we have the ability to work with that entrepreneur. The challenge for a smaller bank is it's difficult to get comfortable lending money to somebody that's had a couple of bad years. And as entrepreneurs, we're entrepreneurs too, we get it. Everybody's had a bad last couple of years. It's been terrible. So, but the challenge is from a bank to identify the people that are had a challenging 2 years but are on the mend and moving forward and have the ability to do that. And you know, that's straight up the challenge. Just as if you were lending money to your neighbor, how do you do that? But you know, I think you're going to see an increase in programs focused at that. The execution and getting it down to that level is always the challenge.
John, did you want to follow on?
Yeah. Following up on Sandy's question, where I feel it's difficult with the banks is that with a conforming loan, we'll make a loan conforming to a buyer. Let's say $700,000, they put 20% down, we'll make that loan a full documentation loan. Now we'll have a buyer that has a high FICO score, mid-sevens, has reserves, he's stated income, he's going to buy a $3 million house and he'll put $1.5 million down. But we won't make that loan. This is what I'm confused is why the banks will not look and say, okay, we got a buyer that's going to put 50% down. We're going to get a jumbo loan for $1.5 million. If he loses his job, what's the chance that the bank having to take that property back? None. You make a loan for $700,000, guy puts 20% down, he loses his job, you're taking that house back.
Well, that's why we want to be in the jumbo home market.
But that's why, but now, those are the buyers who need to get the loans too.
Well, we agree.
Can do it.
I'm trying to do it as fast as I can. Yes. Russell's in charge. Talk to him.
Put $1.5 million in Bank of Manhattan, they'll make the loan.
But taking the jokes aside, but that is the opportunity that I personally see in the market, and why I've been charging. And you're going to see a big focus of our bank in residential home lending. The real answer to the question of why the $700,000 gets made is because that's not my risk, that's the government's risk. I'm not keeping that. I'm handing that right over to Uncle Sam, and that's his risk. Where the other ones, I'm not handing over to Uncle Sam, so they are my risk. And then the other challenge
But
for
there's less of a risk with a guy putting in 50% down on a $3 million house, putting $1.5 million down with a FICO and with reserves.
I don't disagree with you, but understand what I'm saying from the difference. You're saying that there's less of a risk there. I agree. From a bank's perspective, there's more risk because I have the lesser risk, or the other one I have none of the risk. Even though he's a higher borrowing risk, the local bank and the big bank too, B of A, is sending that stuff on to the government. As soon as they're done with it, they're sending it on to the government, and the government's taking that risk. So the challenge is what risks are acceptable and what exceptions are acceptable. And as you point out, you get the guy and it's like, well, 50% LTV, and we've tried to tell some at 50% LTV, you're right, that house has to go down a whole lot before the bank ever gets hurt. If the guy has reserves, he's in good shape. I think the pieces where you're going to see banks like ours get more comfortable are places where the guy is a stated income borrower, but he has demonstrable reserves, and the LTVs are small. That's a guy that we can underwrite and say, okay, we get it, we understand what's going on, you may have some assets, etc., but you have some safety net. Because the other challenge from a bank that I think gets misconceived a lot, and I was on the other side of this for the majority of my life, so I misconceived this a lot, is, well, you're only lending 50% to him, so if it goes bad, you're going to get paid back. What do you care? And the answer is yes, you'll get your money back, but your bank might go under in the process because a bank really can't have a bad loan. And that's the challenge. And that's why things like reserves become more important almost than advance rate. Like that same borrower you're talking about, okay, we might get comfortable that why he stated income and why last year was a tough year in his business and why we want to support him as a bank. He supports us, we want to support him. We might be more comfortable saying to that same guy, why don't we loan you 60%? Because now your reserves will be 10% higher on your $3 million house, that's $300,000. Now you have 2 years worth of reserves. Instead, if I loan you 50% and you put all your money into it and something happens, now you can't make the payment, and that's a problem for me. So those are the balances, and those are the things that we hope to do in certain situations to be a bit less programmatic than a national bank has to be. And it all happens within limits. The challenge is there's lots of situations, but you have to have your box and your limits, and it's based on where the market is. But in general, we agree.
Okay, I've got a question for Mark. You touched on it. Why is inventory so low? What pressures do you see in the immediate future? Is the housing inventory going to start to increase, or do you think with the demand you see with low rates and low prices, the inventory is going to continue to be low? Have you thought about that?
Yeah. Well, the inventory is going to go up simply because demand is going to certainly rise, and that's going to put pressure on the new home inventory. So builders are going to be building. You'll see a lot more of that probably the second half of this year and into 2011. That's if the credit markets can loosen up enough to lend some of these home builders to finance their deal. But as home prices rise, Jim, that really is, there's a statistical correlation that we've seen over time between inventory and price rise. So sellers will be a lot more amenable to putting their house up for sale as prices start to get more into their area of comfort. So look for as prices recover, and they are, as you see, they will, and we consider them